The battlefield is silent now, the clash of swords replaced by the cries of the dying. Smoke coils above the wreckage, bodies scattered like broken shields. The warriors who still stand don't raise their horns in triumph. They move through the ruins with cold purpose, not to celebrate, but to hunt. And for the women dragged from the ashes, the true horror begins. Death had been swift for their fathers and brothers, but for them, death would have been mercy. What Vikings did to captured maidens after battle was worse than death. The legends tell of roaring feasts, golden cups raised high, halls echoing with laughter after victory. But that was the lie. When the flames of battle died down, what remained was not glory, but silence thick with dread. For the captured maidens, the end of fighting marked the beginning of something far worse. Stripped of safety, stripped of status. No longer daughters of kings or wives of warriors, they became spoils. To the victors, their worth wasn't measured in bloodlines or honor, but in silver, in service, in the suffering they could endure. This was the unspoken price of defeat, the fate written not in sagas of triumph, but in shadows history tried to forget. In the markets of Dublin, human lives were weighed like grain and priced like livestock. Young women, torn from their homes, stood in chains as merchants shouted bids. A healthy maiden could be traded for enough silver to buy a farm. Her beauty, her skill, raising her value as if she were no more than an object. Names erased, identities stripped away, catalogued, inspected, sold. Some forced into Norse households. Others shipped across seas to distant empires, never to see their homelands again. For these captives, survival wasn't freedom. It was a sentence. She had been a princess once, a daughter of kings, raised to inherit a throne. But when the longships came, crowns and titles meant nothing. Dragged across the sea, she was paraded in foreign markets, strangers haggling over her fate. To her captors, she was not royal blood, only a prize to be claimed, a womb to be traded. And in the end, her story ended not in the halls of her ancestors, but in exile. A wife by force in a land that was never hers. Her name was lost, her legacy erased. A queen turned into property. High on the cliffs of Scotland, the nuns of Coldingham watched the horizon darken with sails. They knew what came with Viking raiders. Fire, slaughter, and the violation of every woman within stone walls. Abbess Eba made her choice. She raised a blade to her own face, cutting away beauty so it could never be used against her. One by one, her sisters followed, disfiguring themselves in defiance. When the Vikings broke through, they found not trembling victims, but a hall of bloodied, silent women. Enraged at being denied their spoils, the invaders set the monastery ablaze. The sisters did not scream. They burned, unbroken. Their last act, a rebellion of flesh and fire. In Canterbury, the walls held for weeks, but betrayal opened the gates. The Vikings poured in, swords flashing, fire spreading through sacred halls. The city's leaders were dragged out in chains, but the noble women were not slain. They were too valuable, hostages, pawns in a cruel game of ransom. Months passed in captivity, their lives reduced to bargaining chips. When the silver was finally paid, a mountain of wealth heavy enough to bankrupt kingdoms, their freedom was bought like a debt settled. They were not rescued, they were transacted, their worth tallied in cold, gleaming coin. On the rock of Dumbarton, a fortress stood proud for months. Its defenders clung to hope as Vikings ringed it tight. But water is stronger than stone. When the well ran dry, thirst broke their will where swords could not. The gates opened. The victors swarmed inside. What followed was not mercy, but inventory. Hundreds of captives, maidens, wives, even queens, marched out as human cargo. That winter, longships heavy with silver and flesh pushed off down the Clyde. By spring, the slave markets of Dublin overflowed. These women were not collateral damage of war. They were its purpose. Sieged, thirsted, shipped. Across the raw, volcanic land of Iceland, farms rose from ash and stone. But their foundations were built on stolen lives. Viking settlers did not arrive alone. They dragged women across the sea, torn from Ireland and Scotland. These captives were forced into marriages they never chose, their children becoming the roots of a new nation. Centuries later, DNA reveals the truth. Most of the men carried Norse blood, but most of the women did not. They were outsiders, their freedom stolen, their futures rewritten. The saga of settlement was not bravery and exploration. It was abduction dressed up as destiny. Beneath a burial mound in Norway, the Oseberg ship lay sealed in blue clay, its carvings gleaming like frozen fire. Inside rested two women, one elderly and powerful, the other younger, her fate far murkier. For decades it was said she was a loyal servant, honored to follow her mistress in death. But science whispered a darker truth. Her DNA traced not to Scandinavia, but far away to lands around the Black Sea. She may not have chosen this grave at all. She may have been a captive, killed to serve a queen even in the afterlife. Bound in glory, that was never hers. For the men who fell, death was swift. For the women taken, the torment stretched on, designed to strip away every trace of who they had been. Captivity was not survival. It was a life sentence of servitude, violation, and erasure. Their suffering did not end on the battlefield. It began there. To the Vikings, leaving them alive was not mercy. It was the cruelest punishment imaginable. Death ended pain. Captivity preserved it. The chronicles rarely linger on their voices. Yet the traces remain, in the brittle lines of sagas, in the cold entries of medieval ledgers, in the bones unearthed by archaeologists. These fragments piece together a truth the legends tried to bury. The Viking Age was not only conquest and plunder. It was the systematic breaking of women. Each record, each shard of evidence, is a whisper from those silenced. A reminder that behind every raid was a shadowed ledger of human lives. The battlefield falls silent once more. The fires smolder, the screams fade, and only the future remains. A future stolen from every maiden dragged into chains. The Vikings didn't just take wealth. They didn't just claim land. They took bloodlines, identities, and hope itself. Generations were rewritten by force. Entire destinies erased. This was conquest measured not only in silver, but in shattered lives. What Vikings did to captured maidens after battle was worse than death. If you dare to face more of history's darkest truths, stay with us, because the past is far crueler than the myths ever admit.